doing mass testing on Thursday.
Right, that's actually part of the community testing that they're having at St. Anthony's that Public Health announced. So it's tomorrow morning for Tamuning residents,
Right.
and apparently now for staff.
The staff of the school and also parish workers in the St. Anthony church.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and so the principal had, it was, kind of sad because he had said that they worked on all this prep to reopen St. Anthony, and
Right.
what was it he said? He goes, no, I don't even know if we're going to make
He wanted to, he said something about a pilot program, was hoping to be able to be selected for this
Right.
pilot program that would launch in July, which would be a combination of distance learning and in-class instruction. But now he is unsure because Public Health did shut down the school until further notice.
Right, and so we wanted to bring on go ahead, Jay.
Okay, I was going to say real quick before we get, Dr. Juan Flores, the
Okay.
superintendent. Chamarita Regis just posted a comment. She's saying, Chris, do you have any updates on hotspots? We've actually got an article on KUAM.com right now about what the definition of hotspots. It has been expanded a little bit.
Well, she said any update on hotspots on island. I don't know about all that.
Oh, okay, yeah, nothing to that, but no, we do have that article about what hotspots as far as inbound travelers and what countries have been identified. So, Chamarita, if you want to check that out, we got that up for you.
You could put it in the comments, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we wanted to bring Juan Flores on to kind of find out exactly what it is that's going on with the reopening of Catholic schools. Good morning, Dr. Juan.
Morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing all right, and yourself?
So how's the
Doing
weather?
great. Doing great.
Pretty nice day, huh?
Not bored at all, and there's no rest for the wicked. So
Exactly.
we're plugging along.
Yeah. So Juan, what are we looking at with the Catholic schools? I know that in your text yesterday you had said that you guys have done your part and you're now waiting on the government of Guam. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So the principals of the schools are very anxious, mainly because the families are very anxious. I actually talked to a parent yesterday afternoon, and she was worried that we weren't sending out any notices. And I said that the reason we haven't done that is because it would be irresponsible for us to do so if we were going against any of the prescribed protocols. So we've come up with a plan to maybe meet the expectations, the current expectations for gatherings that have to do with occupancy rates or, looking at the number of square feet we should have with a certain number of students. And so a couple of things are going on. First, I want to mention that planning for the school, for the opening of school, coincides with the funding from the Education Stabilization part of the CARES Act. And that's to get money for health and safety, which is our number one concern, social emotional learning, and enhancing distance education. Mm-hmm. So one of the thoughts is especially for the elementary schools, pre-K to 8, and that includes our nursery, kindergarten schools, to make sure that kids are in school all day, every day, or at least during regular school hours, but every day. And the way we're going to work on that, the plan right now is, the schools are preparing for it, to have 50% occupancy in the classroom, and then to find locations around the campus where we'll have enhanced distance learning opportunities. So one school's plan is to get camcorders, and the students who are not in the classroom could watch the teacher in class live streamed, or those kids who are not in class will be doing work that the teachers will assign, but then see their teacher the next day. So I want to just reiterate, safety is the primary concern. The continuity of teaching and learning, or at least to start it and then continue it. And then the third thing is to make sure that we continue to build community. And that's why we want to make sure that the kids will be in school, either in a classroom every day or could be a satellite location on campus, but they'll be in school every day and monitored by faculty and staff every day. That's our plan right now. And along with all of that, by the way, is all the precautions with, weekly sanitization stuff and daily wipe downs and getting the thermometers. I forget what the handheld thermometers. So we make sure that if kids have a fever, that we don't have them at school. We take care of them. All of those things will be in place.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Doc.
I'm sorry. Could you just go over that again? Your plans to reopening with 50% in the classroom, and then have distance learning capabilities outside of the classroom. So are you saying that students would be able to do distance learning from home? Because I know you say you wanted kids to be at school every day.
Well, they could do it at home, but our strong feeling is that, especially for the elementary students up to the 8th grade. There are a couple of reasons why we want them in school. Number one is to help the parents out, because we don't want the parents having to worry about what the kids are going to do on the days they're not in class. And the second is we feel that if they're doing the distance learning in school, any kind of distance learning in school, that they're going to be supported by those who are going to be monitoring their work. They could be other faculty members, they could be staff members who've been trained to go online with the students, to help them with written assignments, pen and paper assignments, to making sure that if we're trying to get resources online, even getting digital books online, so that if the teachers assign kids to read books, the idea of checking out a book at the library, we might not be ready to do that yet. So what if the kids had access to digital books? The kids could still read high-interest books or do current events, age-appropriate current events. We're banking on getting the support from the CARES Act funds for a lot of devices, although a lot of our schools already have a lot of equipment.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you guys were getting money from the Education with Stabilization Fund, GDOE. They got a significant portion of that, and then some of that funding is going to be set aside for schools that aren't public schools. And so how much money did the Catholic schools get out of that pot?
We're not actually going to get any money. We're going to get services. So everything we get has to be procured through DOE. But we are in a really good position because the Department of Education, which is our local education agency here, is committed to making sure that we get an equitable distribution of that CARES Act money. So there's some money set aside, I can't remember the percentage, for administrative costs, and then all of the money, there's $41 million. Some of it set aside for administrative functions, and the rest of the money is going to be equally distributed based on student population among both public and non-public school students. And so what we're spending per student is the same as what DOE is spending per student. This is not true in other states and maybe even territories, but it's certainly true here. And it's part of a directive from the U.S. Department of Education that the private non-public schools get an equal distribution, equal allocation of the funds. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be, the estimate is probably going to be almost $1,000 some per student, or for us, it's almost $3.9 million. Mm-hmm. That's an estimate because there's still some issues being settled to determine the allocations.
Mm-hmm. You just threw me off.
Sorry, I have that effect on women.
No.
I thought maybe it was the $3.9 million.
I did want to ask about the start of the school year. When are we looking at that, or is it up to each individual school to determine when they're going to start?
Technically, I've said this to you guys before, that, as the superintendent of the Office of Catholic Education, I support the schools, but really many of the schools work independently. But in our last meeting, we talked about the idea of starting school somewhere around the first week in August. One of the things that we have to do is we have to do a better job or a different job this year in terms of orientation. So more likely than not, the actual first day of class probably will not be until the second week in August. But there's going to be a lot going on right at the beginning. Mm-hmm. we're hoping to have a lot of professional development in the month of July. So I'm hoping the principals will also give the teachers, at least a few days off so they're not burnt out before we even start school. But we're looking at the start in August.
What about this? We had Robert Crisostomo from St. Anthony's on the show yesterday, and he was mentioning about this pilot program or project, and was hoping that St. Anthony's would be selected for that. Do you have any information about what this pilot project is? Because they were hoping to open in July.
Yeah, so, I've actually tried to reach out to public health and the governor's office about that and haven't gotten a response. And it's in line with, because we have other schools that are interested in doing something like that, doing summer programs. I mean, one of the areas that I know both St. Anthony and other schools are looking at is helping 8th grade students get ready for the 9th grade year, right? Since we've had sort of a rough fourth quarter, we want to make sure those kids are ready to move on to high school. But I haven't gotten a response. We've looked at the protocols that have been approved by the Japanese school, and I'm hoping that other schools would be able to take advantage of that opportunity. If we just did it on our own, and then ask for forgiveness afterwards, which, of course, forgiveness is a critical part of the Catholic Church, but we don't really want to do anything that would jeopardize any kind of safety or not follow protocols that the government is setting up for us.
Have you, as a superintendent, had any discussions with the Department of Public Health in terms of notifying schools when an individual is tested or tested positive for COVID on any of the campuses? Because I know that Mr. Crisostomo was concerned that he had only found out Friday about a teacher testing positive. There was no written notification. They just received a phone call, but had also learned that this individual had been tested a week prior.
Right. So we are actually. I haven't had. The answer to your question is no. I haven't had that. But you know what? We're monitoring everything we're reading from CDC and from the Department of Public Health. Gone through all the JIC announcements and executive orders. And what we're going to focus on is setting up policies that all the schools will follow. And that's one perfect example. I mean, one of the things you have to pay attention to is, what if a child shows up at school with a fever? What's the protocol going to be? And then what happens if we know that a student has been out sick for a few days and has been tested and then tested positive? What are those protocols as far as we're concerned? And one of the greatest challenges is, especially with the opening up of businesses and other activities, if school is the only place that kids will go to, then it's easy to target the exposure, right? We can limit what the student's exposure was, but if there are other places, then that's going to be a challenge for the family. But we will do what we need to do. If, in fact, there's a student tested positive, then those students who are most likely to have been exposed will probably also be tested. But a protocol like that is something we're working on. When kids come back to the school, it's not going to be business as usual because we need to minimize the movement of kids on campus. So lunch will be delivered to the classrooms or to the satellite learning centers, but we're not going to have kids just running around as they always did, or walking around as they always did, because, again, we have to minimize their interactions.
COVID it's impacted schools financially, and I'm wondering, because I know that we spoke with you before, and I believe I asked you this question: are you seeing or anticipating any of the Catholic schools not reopening as a result of COVID?
I don't see that right now.
Down,
and one of the things that is helping us right now is almost all of the schools have received PPP loans, and they've used that for a couple reasons. One is to continue payroll through the summer and maybe even into the next school year because of the extension of the time for using up those funds. The other thing, and part of that was critical because many families found it difficult to keep up with tuition payments at the end of the school year. and the schools are, dealing with those families, and helping them figure out how to make up their obligations. But there are also schools that had planned different fundraising activities towards the end of the school year, and those were fundraising activities that were going to go towards operations, and so they didn't get those opportunities. So the PPP loans really helped with that. So right now, we're going to work really hard to make sure that no schools close. We're gonna go out of our way, and we're already talking about some initiatives for marketing our schools and trying to encourage enrollment. And I hope that we're going to capture families that maybe didn't think about Catholic education before but will now, and do so because we're going to pay attention to what's going to be best for the kids, as everybody else is, but
Right.
In our own way.
Well, thank you, Daco. We just wanted to get you on to get an update, and then as we get closer, to July, and we'll give you a call and fold you back in.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Mr.
Thanks,
Flores.
Doc. Wash your hands.
Okay.
Okay, bye. Hey, 802, again, we're KUAM FM, Agatni, Guam. It is the KUAM News takeover of Guam's favorite, containing COVID. Good morning to our TV 11 viewers. Thanks for joining us. That was Dr. Juan Flores, the superintendent of the Catholic schools, talking about the reopening of the schools and the measures they're taking, and also touched a little bit on St. Anthony Catholic School. And as you guys saw the news, they had a teacher there that tested positive, and they'll be kind of piggybacking on the big community mass testing that's going on in Tamuning tomorrow from 9 to 12. Let's keep it going on the phones here. We have Attorney General Levan Camacho. We'll bring him on to discuss something that one of our favorite subjects, the high-intensity drug trafficking area designation for the island of Guam. And I think this is pretty cool.